Well, you guys in Kenya, it is a real joy to be with you and to present this workshop on leadership. Leadership is so necessary these days, and so we hope that these lectures will really help you in becoming a better and a stronger church. Of course, you know our pastor is Oscar D. Epps, and the president for Epps School of Ministry, or the dean of students, is Dr. Sherwin Ramey. I'm Oliver Phillips, and I trust that these series of workshops will really be helpful to you as you move forward. Dr. Mogi, of course, we bring you greetings. You guys are doing a tremendous job there in Kenya. And so we hope that your own ministry will be enhanced and enriched because of these. Let's take a moment to settle our own minds. Amen. There are going to be 60 slides presented for you, and we're going to separate them into two. So you're going to have workshop 1 and workshop 2. So we will be, I hope you have your Bibles with you, or if you have your phones with you. So we'll make some references to some passages of scriptures as we move along. And of course, I will be sharing the screen with you for this PowerPoint. So let's get started on this, and we trust that we'll really have a great time as we work with these. As you see, it is Introduction to Leadership Paradigms. And paradigms are different models of ministry that we use as we do ministry. And so I'm going to be introducing you to some paradigms that are a little different than the modus operandi or the way we have done ministry. One of the things that I think is critical is that we cannot keep doing things the way we have done them. And so this is what is very critical, and I think it's important for us to understand what we are doing and how we doing it, how we are doing ministry. Of course, the Dean of Christian Education is Dr. Sherwin Ramey. An overview, this is an overview of different models of leadership and how these models can be applied to motivate and build a successful purpose-driven team. You would notice that I will emphasize this whole concept of working as a team rather than working as an individual. Leaders are those who are able to convince other people to move along in terms of, number one, in terms of vision, and number two, in terms of purpose. You know the story of Genesis and the creation. What is critical about the story of creation is that the earth was without form and void. So there was just darkness all around, and it is out of this nothingness, so to speak, that God was able to create order and what we call synthesis. So as we do ministry, and as you think about your ministry, understand quite well that let's say that your ministry right now has no form, it has no void. What we're going to do is to call out something out of nothing. The degree then to which you have disorder is the degree to which you have leadership. What a leader does is to create a sense of direction for the team. And so, therefore, it is required of the leader to call out and to deal with the darkness that seems to hinder progress in your ministry. Leadership requires that you deal with the darkness. But notice this: God never got rid of the darkness. Let me say that again. God never got rid of the darkness. You will never be able to get rid of the darkness in your ministry. What God did was God prescribed where the darkness should be. Okay? So there are, as we go through this workshop, what you would find, there are some things that you have been doing, and you may not stop doing it, but you might relegate it to another area of importance, so to speak. So let me repeat: God never got rid of the darkness, but God prescribed where the darkness should be. So God said, God saw, and God separated nothingness from form and void. So it is critical then that as we do ministry, if we don't name it, someone else would. You have to be able to identify the areas of ministry that don't contribute a sense of effectiveness to what you have been doing. And so you relegate it to another area of importance or to a lesser area of importance. So the earth was without form and void, and out of all of this, God was able to create order. What you are going to be doing and the tools that you will get from this workshop, you would be able to separate what, or able to prioritize. Let's use that word, that's a better word, so that we're able to prioritize that which we have been doing. Okay? Now, the next slide is what I call CAWKI, CAWKI, which is Church as We Know It. CAWKI is dead. In this sense, if you notice on these arrows, the members, the arrows pointing towards this church here, members. If you notice, now this old paradigm of having members to be the most important, in other words, the church is member-centered. It's all about members who are coming in. And what you have is a church that is inward focused. Now, what I'm suggesting is that this is an old paradigm where all we are concerned about is the members. Of course, we have to take care of the members, but we cannot be an inward focused church that all we think about is the members. Now, you have these arrows that are going outward. What I'm suggesting is that we ought not to be, if we are going to be an effective church, we are not going to be member focused, or that all we care about. And let me say this: I am not suggesting that members are not important. What I'm suggesting here is that we have to understand that the purpose of the church is to be sent. What Jesus Christ in the early church, the emphasis was going out to Jerusalem, to Judea, into Samaria, and into the uttermost parts of the world. Okay, so the old paradigm of emphasis only on taking in members. Let me put it this way: that when you take in members, what you have to say to members is that this is not a club. You are not joining a club, but you are joining an army that is outward focused, that is going out to represent the body of Christ. Okay? So, church as we know it, Corky, is dead. The new model and the new paradigm for doing church ought to be outward focused. Send your members out as soldiers in the army to recruit, to represent the church, to talk about the church, to do ministry in the community. So instead of the emphasis being on come, the emphasis is now on go. Let me say that again. Instead of the emphasis being on come, the emphasis should be on go. Go out. Go out and do ministry. Go out and reach people in the community. Go out. You should have teams of members going out into the community to reach the community with Christ. With Christ. Okay? So the old model, Corky, church as we know it, must die. We must have a new model for doing church. And the doing church now is not for people to come to church, but the emphasis should be on sending people out to do ministry in the community. Okay? So let me give you some of the objectives of this workshop. Many congregations are declining due to an inward focus and see their pastor as someone who should only minister to their needs. You kill a pastor that way. If all the pastor does is to feed the flock and to have an inward focus and to minister to the needs of the people who have come to church, not that I'm not saying, and make sure you understand that, I'm not saying that we don't take care of the members. All I'm saying is that the emphasis should be reaching the community for Christ. But pastors must anticipate a better future. This workshop offers hope to pastors and leaders of congregations that have lost their outward focus. By preparing for and leading systemic change, pastors can bring new life into the culture of a congregation, guiding it to answer God's call to reach people with the good news. When you take in members, what we need to be emphasizing is, as I said before, this is not a club. This is, we are about reaching the community for Christ, not exerting all our energies to the members of the church, but to say to the members of the church, now you're going to go out into the community and reach the community for Christ. So communication strategies for transformational change offers practical explanations for how to, number one, okay, so let me point these out. What we're going to do in this workshop is to develop a vision and communicate a strategy for the implementation of this new paradigm. Okay? We will motivate the congregation to embrace the vision. So you have to help your members know that there is a paradigm shift in your church. Develop a vision of what the church would look like in 1 year, in 2 years. Now remember, every church has a mission statement. You have a mission statement. This is who we are. The mission statement says who we are. The vision statement says what are we reaching for? What are we aspiring to become? So you ask yourself the question, what would we look like in 1 year? What would it take for us to reach the community for Christ? So once you develop the vision, we must communicate to the members so that you motivate them to embrace the vision, this new paradigm of reaching the community for Christ. Then, of course, we will study how to develop the resources and the ideas and the personnel to prepare for that change, and we'll talk about that. And to get your people to embrace and implement change. If your members do not embrace this vision, this new paradigm shift, you cannot implement change. And then, of course, we will study how to embed a new DNA into the life of the congregation. Let me spend a minute here. You need to constantly talk about what the vision of the church is. Everyone in the church should know and embrace this new vision of what the church would look like in 1 year. If the members of the church are to reach the community, you develop resources for them to reach the community, but they must prepare for change. Change is difficult. Someone once said that the only people who like change is a wet baby. People don't like change. And sometimes what we have to be able to say to people is that that this is a God thing. This is what God wants the church to look like. This is not personal with us, but this is embracing the mission of Christ for the church. And this must be in the DNA. People, when people join the church, they must understand they are not joining a club. When people join the church, they must understand that the task of the church is to reach the community. Let me put it in another way. The church is not a noun, but the church is a verb. It is not just who we are, but we should be very clear about what we are tasked to do. Very clear. The mission of the church is to reach the community for Jesus Christ. Now, ordinary people can make good leaders. We never underestimate the potential of any individuals in the church to be a leader in the church. Look at everyone who comes in to your church as a potential leader in the church. Peter Drucker once said, "No institution can possibly survive if it needs geniuses or supermen and women to manage it. It must be organized in such a way as to be able to get along under a leadership composed of average human beings." Everyone who comes into the church is a leader. Look at individuals as they come into the church as potential leaders in the church. There are never enough natural born leaders in any church to fill all the leadership positions of that church. So leadership gaps are vacant. We need leaders, but never underestimate the potential of people who join the church. Recruit them as leaders in the church. Now, this slide is confirming some of the things that I'm saying here. We need to aim these leaders at the mission field. The question is then, am I going to get passionate about the mission of Jesus, or stand around just keeping house as the place falls in? So therefore, only God produces real change, and only God can grow the church. However, it is also true that God usually works through leaders who function wisely and are committed to God. So, what's the old saying? We used to say, God has no hands but ours. And God is looking for leaders that God can use in the mission field. Never lose sight of the fact that there's a mission field out there. The church is not a mission field. The church is surrounded by a mission field. Let me say that again. The church is not a mission field, but the church finds itself in the midst of the mission field. And the task, therefore, of the church is to go out into the mission field and reach people for Christ. So I keep talking about paradigms. And so let me explain what I mean about the shifts that have taken place while the church has slept. And I say this because I want to be very clear that Corky is dead. We cannot keep doing church the way we have always done church. Okay? So some things have changed over the last 50 years. But some of us have not noticed the change. So there are 4 changes that I see that have taken place And the business world has understood this, but the church has lagged behind in terms of these changes, these paradigm shifts that have taken place, and we have not recognized those changes. There are four paradigm shifts, as I see it, that have taken place. Number one, there has been a shift from the heroic leader to the post-heroic leader. A shift from heroic leader to post-heroic, and I will expand on that. Number two, there has been a shift from the guarded to the vulnerable. And we're talking here about leadership. There has been a shift from the guarded leader to the vulnerable leader. Number three, there has been a shift from positional authority to earned authority. And fourthly, there has been a shift from task to community. Shift from heroic to post-heroic, a shift from guarded to vulnerable, a shift from positional to earned, and a shift from task to community. So let me break those down for you as to what I mean by this. For a shift from the heroic leader to the post-heroic leader. The heroic leader is the one who determines the direction, finds the right answers, and manages functions. The heroic leader works well in a hierarchical system. Oh, the pastor is in charge. Everything has to go through the pastor. Everything has to go through. So he or she becomes the hero. He directs everything, or she directs everything. The shift, there has been a shift from that kind of heroic leader, that one person at the head. The shift has been this post-heroic leadership is defined by one who shares power and community building. Acts 6 represents that kind of heroic model, as we see how the church developed. But there is this, let me find a passage for you in John's Gospel, chapter 13, and the whole chapter. But let's look at the whole chapter and we'll notice a few things in this. This is something that Jesus was able to deal with his disciples. And I want to make sure we understand this. There was that discussion going on as to who the leader is going to be when Jesus leaves. And they were talking about who is going to lead and all of this. And Peter and John were fighting, and their parents were talking about the line of succession as to who the leader is. And Jesus did something for them and with them, which, you know, that I'm sure that practice has taken place in Africa, which is the washing of the feet. And Jesus did this to show what real leadership is as he washed the feet of the disciples. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took out his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. And after that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus said to him, "You do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." This is the type of participative leadership. And you cannot be an effective leader without being a humble leader. And Jesus was very clear with his disciples, explaining to them what real leadership is. And this is what I talk about participative leadership. Post-heroic leader shares power and community building. Jesus gave up power in order to serve. So we must make that shift. Real leaders lead by being humble and by understanding quite well that it is humility in the midst of your ministry that will validate who you are as a leader. Okay? So this is the shift. Not the person at the top who is the hero. Not the hero syndrome. Oh, I, everything is about that. You hold on to that power. Don't hold on to the power. Share the power with the community. So that's the first. From heroic to post-heroic. It is not the one person that gets all the credit. It's we have done it together. And unless leaders and pastors make that shift from being the heroic leader to the post-heroic leader, you will never be effective in the ministry that you are trying to do. So let's go to the second shift that has taken place. The second shift that has taken place is what I call positional authority to earned authority. You are pastor because somebody has told you that you are the leader. So the positional authority means that someone else has given you that position. So command and control, however, must give way to another, which is called earned authority. Communicate, collaborate, cooperate. It is the Barnabas model. It was earned authority. Genuine authority comes from relationships and servant leadership. So you earn the authority. There is you might have the power, but share the authority. In other words, earn. You might be called pastor because it's positional, but you must make that shift where people understand quite well that you are not just in a position of leadership, but you have earned their trust as a leader. And until you earn the trust of individuals, you will never be able to get them to embrace the vision that you believe God has given you. Earn it. Work for it. Spend time with your people. Spend time in your community. Let people know that you're not just pastor on Sunday mornings, but you care about how they live during the week. Okay, that's the second. Now, this is important, very, 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 very important. From task to community. Values and practices must come before goals and numbers. So don't be so consumed by numbers and goals when people don't understand the values that are treasured by your church. So, to put it succinctly, we must move from the Great Commission to the Great Commandment. We must move from the Great Commission to the Great Commandment. And I want to spend a little time here. We are very consumed by this Great Commission. And I am saying here that we need to go out into the community and spread this because it's what Jesus expects of us. But you cannot do the Great Commission unless you embrace the Great Commandment. The Great Commandment to love one another. The Great Commandment to love people, to care for people, to care how people live. So it is not just sending people out, but it's making sure that people understand that as they go out, what is critical is to love people. Now, if you love people, then it will be very, if you really embrace the Great Commandment, then the Great Commission will fall in place. Come on. Let me go back to my screen here. So Jesus said, "Come, follow me, and I will send you out to fish." So the whole idea of following Jesus, you embrace this love ethic, and it is out of that you go out to fish, because you are a follower of Jesus Christ, because you are a disciple of Jesus Christ. So take a look at the old paradigm here. It is plan. What is the task? And then the community if we so choose. That's the old paradigm. That's task oriented. Notice the progression, the plan, the task, and then the community, which I've said is optional. However, when we shift the paradigm, instead of the community being optional, look at here, the community is essential. And then out of that, let's make up a word. Out of this essentiality of the community, we develop a vision and then we do the task. So it's reversed. Instead of plan, task, and maybe community, it is now the community becomes the most essential ingredient of being a disciple of Jesus Christ. As a disciple, we care for the community. As disciples, we care about the quality of life of people in the community. Then they will come into the church. They'll get saved. They'll have the vision and they'll help us in the task of the church. And lastly, I have one more, but let me, I switch this one in here. We can always ask ourselves, are you an architect or a gardener? And this goes with the other paradigm shift of task. Now, an architect must be precise, organized, persistent, and doesn't often change. There is a plan. The plan comes first, and you follow the plan precisely. The architect or the CEO, the head pastor in charge, in control. The architect model is certain that if you follow the plan, we will succeed. However, you can embrace being the gardener. So communities are built by gardener types. The gardener is always willing to diverge from the original plan. And you know that in Kenya and certain parts of India, where you always have to pay attention to the rains, and you must be always willing to change because the weather is so unpredictable. A lot of growth is out of the gardener's hands. Gardeners depend on the soil. Where is the soil? The soil is the community. Be always flexible to the needs of the community. You are driven not just by the plan. So let's follow the plan. But you become the gardener type. Okay? So the architect model is just follow the plan, just follow the plan. The gardener model is let's check the soil out and be in touch with the soil. So it is time for a paradigm shift. And the last is direction and empowering here. This is part of the other. The American Management Association leadership concept is planning, organizing, and controlling. Many large church leaders adopted this model a long time ago. In the business world, growth is measured by financial profit. In the church world, success is measured by numerical growth. In the midst of a changing world, when uncertainty abounds, we cling to the existing church. However, there must be a change from directing to empowering. Instead of directing, empower people to do. Empower people to experiment. Be always conscious of the community. So what we do in church depends on the needs of the community and how we're going to reach our community. And so therefore, we must understand that only 8% of the iceberg is above the water. Empower others through. Let's take a look then at Ephesians 4:11 through 16. See what we come up with here. Ephesians 4. This is interesting. 11, verse 11. Verse 11. So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and teachers. What? To equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach the unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God. So it's critical then to understand and to embrace the gifts of other people that have come into the church. Existing leaders must realize that they are not the only ones that can drive the car, but share the leadership with others. And the last paradigm shift, this is an interesting one. We shift from destination to journey. Existing, the way we have done ministry in the past is we are goal oriented. When are we going to get there? That's all we care about. Meeting our goals. We must make, that's destination. However, we must make a shift, this shift from destination to journey. So in this fast car here, it's like, let's just get there quickly. The shift that we must make is that I am looking forward to enjoy the sights on the trip. When you begin a road trip, you are focused on the final destination. Let me expand on this a little. I think I need to spend a little time here on this one. Primarily because this is what we do as church. We get consumed, we are impatient because the destination is the most important thing for us. And so we go out into the community and we are like the salesman. We want, like the car salesman, so maybe, we want to make the deal. We have to make a shift from being a salesman, being so consumed about making the deal. What we need to be is a tour guide. And that's why, you see, we are looking forward to enjoy the journey. As we go out into the community and we reach people, don't be so consumed with change and the end product that we are not willing to walk with people along the way until they reach their destination. I usually say when we reach people who are not churched, who are not a part of the church, sometimes church folk would like to say, you are far from the kingdom of God. That's the old paradigm. What we need to be able to say to people is that you are close to the kingdom. Let me join you on that journey. And to understand quite well, you don't know how long that journey is going to be. My children, little children, used to be, I would be going out to preach somewhere, maybe 20, 30 miles. And as soon as my children get in the car, they would just after a half an hour travel, you would always hear them, are we there yet? Are we there yet? They were always consumed with the destination. But as they got older, and we would be traveling along, especially my girls, as they saw boys, they forgot the destination and they became consumed with the journey. They began to enjoy the sights. That's what discipleship and reaching the community is about. We must make that shift from being consumed with the destination so that we become patient with individuals and walk with them on that journey. Are you getting that? Make the shift from destination to the journey. Okay? Next slide. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up people together to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the sea. They will be more patient and understand the task. They will give you a better product. Don't just think about collecting the wood and the task and the work, but teach them to long for the sea. What is that going to look like? What is that going to be like? Okay? So let's talk about barriers to leading change. Most pastors do not see themselves as leaders of congregations. Few pastors are willing to assume the role of leader who takes responsibility for mobilizing the congregation to accept the mission of obeying our Lord's commission. They become the congregational chaplain, preacher, theologian, and so leading the community is not part of their paradigm. They become the chaplain. And so all they care about is just the people in the church. You will notice that I mentioned here, the incentive to change is particularly absent when the ministry environment reacts so negatively and often labels change as unspiritual. So, what I say is that we must move from faithfulness to fruitfulness. Most pastors and leaders are satisfied with a small church and to talk about their faithfulness to God. Well, I'm hanging in there. Nobody is coming to church, but I'm faithful to God. I'm talking about this faithfulness versus fruitfulness. I sympathize with pastors who have been pastoring a congregation for 5 years, 10 years, and all they can talk is about, I'm faithful to God. Look, we must make the shift because it must be both. God has not just called us to be faithful, but God has called us to be fruitful. That's a barrier to change. That keeps us from growing because we are consumed about being faithful. Nobody is, we're not reaching the community, and we boast about being faithful, even though we are not fruitful. That's a barrier. Another barrier is that a lot of congregations are led by a handful of people who have gained that position by default. They have been leaders in the church for 5, 6, 10 years, and nothing is happening. And they keep that position, and they feel threatened by new people coming into the church who will take their position. So they deteriorate to conserving the status quo. They then go out about protecting their own status, which will be threatened by an influx of new people. Elaborate on this. A lot of folks in church feel threatened by new people coming into the church because they're going to lose their position of leadership. That's unchristian. You should be thrilled about new people coming into the church who can help lead the church, who can help direct the church, who can share in ministry. You must be willing to do that as we do ministry. They're not a threat, but God has sent them to the church to be able to help ministry. Most congregations are designed to be small, to remain small, and to function ineffectively. So there is a misalignment. Authority, responsibility, accountability are not aligned. Those are barriers to leading change. But here are factors in leading change. So understand, these are the barriers to leading change. These are factors in leading change. Healthy congregations are outward focused. And a church will grow if the focus is not just on its members, but its outward focus is reaching out. If Few pastors have taken seriously the role of leading an entire congregation to change from conducting ministry for personal consumption to conducting ministry for the purpose of, look at here, transforming the community. This is critical here. The task of the church is to help transform the community. The ineffectiveness of most congregations has led to a theology of smallness that validates our sickly existence and makes us feel better about it. Discussing success, effectiveness, and bold visions in such an environment is frowned upon. Highly dysfunctional congregations become that way over time. Leading such congregations to change takes time and costs emotionally. We must change. Change is necessary. If you keep doing the same things that you have been doing, you're going to get the same results. All right. Now, let's talk about leadership behavior. These are some ingredients that you find in effective leaders, leaders who are about change. And you pastors in Kenya, this is critical. Your behavior must change. And so therefore, these are some ingredients. First of all, there must be a passion. At the heart of all effective leadership is a passion. It must burn on the inside of you. I can't emphasize this enough. This whole idea of passion and what it would take to have pastors who have a passion for their community. One of the best ways to embrace a new passion for ministry is to answer this question. What is it about your community that gives you sleepless nights? As you walk your community, what is it that you see must change? And how the church can be effective in bringing about that change? What is it that's burning in your soul? Or, let's put it another way. If Christ were to come and walk in your community, what would cause Christ to have some pain about your community? And maybe that will stir up in your own heart a healthy passion for change. If you don't have passion for change in your community, you're not going to grow your church. There should be some things about your community that give you sleepless nights. So the first concept of passion is critical and important. But other than the passion, You must have the courage. Tackling change demands courageous leaders who are willing to risk all for the sake of the Great Commission. If your church is not a noun, but your church is a verb, it is what your church must do to help the community be a better place. And as a leader, you must have the courage to tackle the change that you must come about in your community. But you must also be flexible as you work in that community. Different congregations have a different culture of its own. Be flexible. And there comes this old word that we have used over the last 15 years, missional. People are willing to follow and risk greatly if they are convinced that the task and accompanying risk are going to accomplish something greater, something bigger, and more wonderful than they could ever achieve on their own. This whole idea of being a missional people. Help them to embrace that vision. Great leaders have wisdom. Wisdom is the ability to incorporate, assimilate, and synthesize biblical knowledge with human experience to produce spiritual behavior that is balanced and complete, honoring to God. Must be positive, responsibility, and leadership. You're almost through because I want to talk about communicating, and a lot of leaders can't communicate. The primary skill required for strong leadership in the church is an ability to use words. Every spoken word, every phone call, every email, every verbal interaction with people in the congregation reflects an overall communication strategy for change. You have to communicate that change that you want to see come about. Communication needs to be in a positive manner. Don't beat people over the head. Must be positive. Creating and communicating a sense of urgency. The majority of people in our communities are lost to God, and that being lost matters deeply to God. This assumes people value God's heart. That's what a leader must do. Communicate the biblical purposes of God for the church. What is God expecting? Communicate that as a leader. People must hear it from you. You must paint a picture of where the congregation is headed if it does not change. Remind people, if the church doesn't change, what are we going to look like in 5 years from now? Then communicate. Help people to see their community. Help people to sense the loss of those who have left the church and create healthy urgency, not based on guilt, but on mission. Good leadership is what separates the great organizations from the not so great. Managers come and go, but leaders make the difference. Now, I think we're going to just one more slide and we're going to end this session. A good leader serves and supports those he or she would lead. Leaders are visionaries. innovators, communicators, delegators, team builders with a great sense of urgency. This whole idea of the sense of urgency is critical. They support undergird, actively engage, develop, and heal when needed all the organization's team members. Good leaders are enablers who serve their team with support and preparation and clear the way for the team. Well, that brings to an end the first session. And we have ended on this sense of urgency. Great leaders must communicate that if we don't change, what would our church look like if we don't change? And until people grasp that sense of urgency, what would our community look like if we don't impact our community? Leaders communicate a sense of urgency where everybody understands the task and mission of the church, that we must change now. Hope you have learned something from this workshop, part 1, and we will take a rest, and then I'll see you on the other side. God bless you.